consistent with how you're recording and how you're releasing so people know what to expect.
For sure, man. And there's been a couple episodes out of the last 170 in a row where like the production company failed to push upload or something, so it was a couple hours late. And man, the inbox starts filling up.
Right.
Thursday morning, people are like, where the fuck is my endless endeavor? But it's cool, man, because it's like the whole podcast idea, I mean, really Joe Rogan started it, is just allowing people to partake in conversations.
Yeah. And dude, Rogan puts out so much material. I have to delete like a third of them just because it's like, man, I can only get so much. But like when we were on Stump's podcast a couple of years ago, it was literally Monday morning when we flew back from Dallas, and his episodes dropped Monday morning. Dude, we landed in Denver and it was like 27 emails, a whole bunch of orders, like in the first 3 hours.
Dude, that's fucking awesome.
It was crazy.
Yeah, Andy was the catalyst for this too. I don't know if I told you that or not.
No.
When my story went viral in 2020, Andy reached out and said, hey, do you want to do Cleared Hot? And I was familiar with him and familiar with the podcast and stuff. So I was like, fuck yeah, I want to do Cleared Hot.
Yeah.
And flew out to Kalispell and knocked it out. And because he's a former special operations guy and he's a jiu-jitsu guy, we just vibed and had fun, you know? And so same thing, inbox filled up after that. And people are like, that was one of my favorite episodes. You should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. And at first it felt kind of weird because it's like, why should I start a podcast?
Why not you?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and now that I'm doing it and I see it's actually easy and it's fun. And if you don't put your emphasis on your downloads and you just put your emphasis on sharing space with good people, having good conversations, that's what it's about, man.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are 9-to-5ers and commuting and fucking stuck in the rat race, they might not have adequate amount of time to be able to sit down and just have authentic conversation.
Yeah.
And that fills that cup for them, you know, because that filled that cup for me for a long time. When I was working in Los Angeles, commuting on the train and shit, I had all my guys that, you know, that I would go to and listen to, and it's cool.
Well, if you are in the 9 to 5, I mean, just do the math. You're up at 6. You're showered. You're out the door by 7:30. You've got a 30-minute commute. You're done at 5. You go home. You got a wife. You got kids. By 9 o'clock, the whole day is just shot to hell.
I know, bro.
So how do you get a conversation to talk to a jiu-jitsu guy, or if you want to delve into some level of education with whatever it may be?
Yeah.
And we've got more access to data than people have ever had.
Bro, I don't think you would think with the current state of just connectivity and access to material, we don't really need college anymore.
I was having that same conversation with Eli last night.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously I tell the young guys here at the academy, if you want to be a surgeon or a lawyer or something that requires very specific training, then the college route may be very applicable to you. But don't go to college just to say, hey, I'm going to get a degree in poli-sci and see what's next.
Yeah.
Because those degrees don't pay the bills.
No. And so I'm 40, I'll be 41 next week. I've got a degree, graduated from college in 2005. That was really the beginning of the podcast era. And I've went and spoke to a couple different college graduates that people are like, hey, we want to talk to this student about coming back for masters and whatever. I remember one particular from my alma mater at Colorado State. I went and bought this young lady a coffee and we talked. She had an offer to go back to Utah for a $75,000 a year job. This is 2015 or so. After a year, they'd pay for her master's degree. And she had 2 schools. We're like, she needs to go do her master's now. I'm like, and her degree was in business. I said, why?
Yeah.
An MBA a year from now is worth the same money today. You're going to spend 50 G's getting it done.
And if you can get your foot in the door somewhere.
And she'd already interned.
Yeah.
Like it was a slam dunk. I said, master's would be great. It's not going to really, it's not going to take you from brown belt to black belt. You still haven't applied the knowledge.
Yeah.
Go work for these people. Let them pay for the master's degree. It was just a no-brainer to me, and I haven't been asked to speak to any more recent graduates from that school.
Yeah,
I messed up the money.
He's messing up our business model. That's exactly right. Well, fuck, man. I have no doubt this is going to be a fun episode because, Shawn Baker connected us because you own Colorado Craft Beef. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders, my wife and I. She technically is the boss. She had 51%. So.
And I think this is going to be a fun podcast because we're in a weird time right now where just healthy, natural food sources, they're kind of in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
Like people are trying to poo-poo on beef. They're trying to poo-poo on sustainable farming. And I mean, I don't know if we want to put our tinfoil hats on and talk about how they want us to eat bugs and live in 10 by 10 squares and all that. But it's weird how human beings have eaten meat since the beginning of time. And then in the last 50 years or whatever, there's groups of people that are starting to demonize it. So it's just kind of bizarre. But yeah, just introduce yourself and give a little bit of background about where you came from. And then we'll just dive into it and talk about some jiu-jitsu, talk about fucking ranching, all the stuff, dude.
Right. So my name's Jeff Smith, originally born and raised in Pendleton, Oregon, a little rodeo town about 4 hours from where we're sitting right now. My dad actually was DOD SWAT at a chemical weapons facility in Oregon. So he grew up, he went to work every day carrying a gun. He wore BDUs to work and grew up in that very service-based mindset. He was a Vietnam vet. He was actually on a boat just south of Saigon when Saigon fell, and he told me stories, actually right before I went on Andy's podcast, that they had the entire fire system up on the boat just to blow helicopters away so they couldn't land because he was on an LSD, landing ship dock for like deploying Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom owned a small real estate company, always worked in agriculture, so every summer it was pea harvest, hay harvest, wheat harvest, county fair, go back to school. Didn't do a lot of sports growing up, played a little baseball, but worked. I just loved to work. I'd, run equipment or buck hay bales or just go out and, you got to get money for school. And mom and dad were pretty hardcore on me not having a job in town. Mm-hmm. So I was like, go figure it out. So, you start getting paid 50 cents a sprinkler head to move sprinklers in hayfields or whatever it might be. And with that, you learn to network, and then your hunting area gets better because they want you to come back next summer. So now you get to hunt the river and shoot ducks on their property.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was like, oh man, this networking thing and sales and that, nothing happens in business until you get a sale.
Uh-huh.
And luckily went and got into, the business and finance world, did a bunch of like heavy corporate stuff and just kept building a resume until, here we are.
So, I mean, you grew up in agriculture, but that wasn't anything that was family owned. You were working for other people. So you just, for whatever reason, just were drawn to that and took an interest in that.
I always said that if I could chase cows and build fence for a living, I would do that.
And now look at you.
But it doesn't pay worth a damn to run a fence stretcher all day.
Yeah.
And, so, luckily I was able to parlay some other skill sets. But actually my wife, Kara, the co-founder of Colorado Craft Beef, she is a 5th generation rancher.
Oh, okay.
She grew up doing it. So,
So you married in.
Hell yeah, I did.
Were you playing the long game when you met her?
I was not.
I've always been interested in this, and now.
Yeah, I was already in ag. I was actually running a big construction company. And luckily when, the first time I met her dad, we had Rocky Mountain oysters. I don't know if that was a lesson or a little shot across the bow. But, to anybody listening, if you're going to marry up and be the ugly one. I knocked both of those out of the park. So, it was just one of those things. We met, she was living in Boise working for the University of Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living in Pendleton running a construction company. I'd moved back from the Midwest. And, from there, I went into heavy corporate sales for a company out of Iowa, and I built seed cleaning plants and automated packaging machines. And like Coors was one of my capital accounts in Colorado.
Okay. So fuck, man, you kind of done a little bit of everything.
Eli and I were talking last night, and he's like, man, how'd you figure all this stuff out? I said, I'm a translator in business. If the safety guy needs to buy off on the plan, I will figure out a way to make him understand what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, all the people, I'm the humblest of 4-stripe white belts that gets beat up for fun. But I was talking to Eli, and I'm like, look, man, you've got to talk give and take. You can't overcommit to stuff. And we're talking business. And I'm like, and we're literally sitting on the edge of the mat. And I said, so look, man, you can't overcommit to a collar grip for too long, or somebody's going to throw you on your ass. And he's like, okay. I said, everything you learn on these mats is applicable in business. 110%.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
Oh, well, Pete Roberts from Origin and I were talking, and he's like, man, he goes, if it wasn't for me finding jiu-jitsu when I did in life, because he was always an athlete.
Yeah.
He's like, that gave me a different, and I could be paraphrasing incorrectly, but basically it gave me a different mindset on some of the problems I was facing and a different way to work them out.
For sure.
In a way that wasn't as stressful. Or maybe you're doing it, back in your lizard brain because some bitch is trying to choke you.
Yeah.
So you can't not be there.
Dude, I tell people all the time, the lessons that you learn on the mats are applicable to damn near every other aspect of your life. Being a better parent, being a better spouse, business, like friendships, just any type of relationship, how you confront adversity, how you confront hardship, how you confront failures. Like on the mats, you're confronting those emotions on a nightly basis, and then you get conditioned to them. Mm-hmm. And then it's okay. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. And, right before we started recording, you're like, man, you got like a really cool culture here, a good group of people,
Absolutely.
know? And I hear that a lot. And, I usually joke with my team and say, hey, you know what, this place's culture has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is just the catalyst that brings us together. And then the culture is the people. But I do think in order to build strong culture, you have to go through some hard shit together.
Yeah. 100%.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be jiu-jitsu, but when you endure, and that's why like military units, you always hear about how close those guys are. And people, when I was in the Army, people used to tell me the best friends you'll ever have in your life are the guys in your platoon. And while I did have great relationships with those guys, and I still do with a lot of them to this day, the bonds I form through jiu-jitsu, they're just as powerful as that.
Yeah. Well, to slap and bump and go at it with people you don't know, right? Like I walked in here last night and I had probably 8 people. Oh, how long have you been coming here? And I was like, I'm just visiting for the day. Everything was cool. But, they'd never seen me. I'm not a small guy. That kind of stands out.
Uh-huh.
And it was just so interesting watching them. Oh, are you going to be here more often? How are you going to be here for Friday? I mean, it was almost like they were disappointed I was leaving.
Yeah.
And it was like just a good group of dudes. And actually the ladies were great too. So I don't mean that.
No,
don't mean to cut them
Yeah,
out.
Rachel Anderson probably pulled you aside and introduced you to half the team. That's usually her role.
Oh, nice. Your mother hen.
Yeah, exactly. Every gym needs one.
Oh.
She's gym mom.
And you need an enforcer, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's why I think the military model or the jiu-jitsu model, man, if you are asking for it, you're gonna get it
for sure, man.
You're gonna get self-regulated, and this snowflake mentality that so many people live within. That's not what founded this country.
No, bro.
And people are missing that.
And I say it all the time. You can't be. Well, I actually stole it from Rogan. You can't be full of shit on the mats.
No, the mat doesn't.
Let you lie. So you can posture. You can have ego. And we all have these things inside of us to a certain degree. Like I'm not saying that jiu-jitsu is fucking just completely cured me to being like a fucking Buddha, but the ego is constantly getting checked, And so, a lot of people say, leave your ego off the mats. I don't think you can leave your ego completely off the mats because we're fighting each other and we're trying to win. Yeah. Right. But what it does is it forces you to have a healthy relationship with your ego.
Sure.
And I say it, I always put it like this. Jiu-jitsu doesn't show you who you are. It shows you who you aren't. Because a lot of men especially have a misconception of just what you are capable of as a man. And then if you have a 120-pound kid strangle you or a young woman, it forces you to look in the mirror and be like, okay, I'm not who I thought I was. Mm-hmm. What's next? And people usually go one of two ways. They hide from that emotion because it doesn't feel very good, or you dig it, you lean into it and you say, okay, I know that this is the place that can fix this. So let's fucking go.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it forces you to kind of understand like, hey, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing here, but because I was shown that I have a massive deficiency, I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to put energy and effort into it, and I'm going to fix this problem. The type of people that do that are usually good human beings. The type of people I want to share space with, and this place has an uncanny ability for people that don't fit that vibe to see their way out.
Yeah, it's self-regulating.
Yeah, it's self-regulating.
Yeah.
I have only had we've been open 8 years now, or maybe 9, coming up on 9. I've never had to ask. I've had to ask one person to leave and say, "Hey, this isn't the gym for you. I'm sorry."
Right.
And it was because of just bullshit drama. He was talking out in town and shit like that, right? But 99% of the time, if you're not congruent with the team's vibe, people see their own way out. You know, I had a guy who recently signed up and he didn't want to roll. He just wanted to drill, right? Sure. And that's cool. Like, and especially when you're new, if you're not comfortable rolling, I respect that. But at the same time, rolling's where you make your money. You know, I know some gyms are like, we don't want you rolling for 6 months. My personal opinion on that is you're doing those people a disservice. Rolling is where you develop your angles, your timing, and all the little details that you don't really even understand you're honing.
Yeah, those micro adjustments.
Yeah, exactly.
Just happen.
Because like you might do something in drilling and it works perfectly, but when you do it live, if the timing is just a fraction of a second off, it doesn't work.
Yeah, so the way I train, actually, so I roll at Denver Compound under Justin Downing. He's the owner, and then Morrison Butler is my coach. And I'm 90 miles from the ranch to go to the gym. So I go up once a week.
Okay.
I've usually got deliveries or meetings in Denver. It's not ideal, but it's a good fit. I got recommended there by a buddy of ours, Dan Hart. He's a black belt under Henry out of Chicago.
Okay.
And he's like, look, man, if you're in Denver, you should go here. Well, so what I'm running into is my black belt's like, man, he goes, you can perform more moves as a white belt because I do a private every week. He's like, mechanically, you know where all these moves are. He goes, your mat time, though, and your ability to employ all that knowledge, it's just going to take time.
Well, that's actually like, what a perfect statement from your professor, because nothing could be more accurate. You're and that's why I tell people all the time when they want privates, I'm like, here's the deal with privates. Exactly that. They will teach you how to put an armbar on someone, but they won't teach you how to catch an armbar on a fully resisting opponent.
Yep.
And so like, it's interesting that he's seeing that in you. But here's the other side of it too, that I tell people all the time. Some jiu-jitsu is better than no jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Your life, your circumstances, 90 miles, you got to make it work with what you have.
Well, and my trend is positive. Like, that's what I try to talk to people about in my business consulting.
Yeah.
Oh, this isn't perfect. I'm like, well, let's take perfect and throw that out the goddamn window, because perfect is a horrible concept.
Yeah.
But is your trend better? You know, if we're looking at a business, are your sales better? Is your net profit better? Are you making more money with the same employees? You know, there's a lot of different metrics you can utilize.
Yeah.
You know, if we take my journey through jiu-jitsu and my time with Dr. Baker, I'm down 80 pounds.
That's fucking awesome, bro.
I'm packing muscle in ways I've never packed it before. I feel better. I'm 41 years old next week, and I know for a fact I could have whipped my own 30-year-old ass 10 years ago.
Isn't that a good feeling?
It's crazy. And then, you know, we've got 2 little girls. Emma will be 3 in November, and Addie just turned 2. That was the catalyst for me to like look in the mirror and go, oh, man.
Got to fix this.
Well, I was 37 when Emma was born. I was like 310 pounds. I'm a math guy. And I looked in the mirror, like I'm holding her in the hospital, and I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to be 55 when she's 18. The trend I'm on right now probably won't put me in the fucking ground, but I certainly won't be running around. And when she brings home a 16-year-old boy when I'm 53,
yeah,
I'm going to look like a sad sack of shit. I got to change that. I owe those girls a different thing. And, you know, if that's your boss or your spouse, I'm not saying you owe people stuff. But, man, if they're putting in the work and they're trying to be better, why the hell wouldn't you want to row the boat the same way?
Yeah.
And so...
And, bro, our one of our roles, I feel like a lot of American men have lost touch with this, but it doesn't matter any way you slice it. If you are the father of the household, you're charged as those ladies' protector.
100%.
Period.
Yeah.
And is something going to happen? Well, maybe. We don't fucking know what the universe brings.
Oh,
and
we were at the county fair a month ago for Addie's birthday. We took her, they could ride the carnival rides, and a little squall blew through Sterling. It was very bizarre, like 40-mile-an-hour winds for about 8 minutes. Well, I'm standing at the petting zoo because for some damn reason, they want to go to town and pet goats. I'm like, we live on a ranch. We have so much of this crap, but they just love animals, and you got to embrace that.
Yeah.
But this squall comes up, and Kara and the girls are in there. We had our nanny with us and her boyfriend, and he and I stood outside and helped this poor guy that had the petting zoo hold his tent down so the son of a bitch didn't blow away. And I told Kara, I said, go to the bleachers, go under the grandstands. There was a CMU bathroom building. I said, take the girls to the bathroom. And my wife is a rock star. She's like, absolutely, great call. She bails out with the girls. We make sure the stroller's good. 10 minutes later, we help everybody get things dealt with. And it didn't occur to me like, oh, I got to whatever. I'm just like, no, like you need strong women that can help in situations like that. But you need to be a leader. Somebody needs to be able to make a call.
100%, man. And you can't, just the reality of this world, you can't be the leader you're supposed to be if you're 80 pounds overweight.
That's for damn sure.
If you needed to pick those, like let's say it was a little more dangerous and you needed to scoop those girls up and run 200 yards or whatever it may be, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not saying everyone needs to be an Olympian, but I feel like if you have children, you need to be able to at least live in a life where you can be their protector. And if you don't want to be someone's protector, don't fucking have kids.
Yeah. Well, and the weird thing for me, I've always been a ranch kid.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been mobile. I'm on the ground working on stuff. I didn't realize how out of shape I was because in my head, it's like, well, I'm still functional. I mean, I'm still moving hay bales. I'm still able to get up and down. But I didn't realize how bad it was until it got better. And I was like, oh my God, like this is so different.
Well, that's very interesting you say that because I've never been severely overweight in my life or completely out of shape. But I think about there's been times in my life where I've been in elite shape, where I could run and fight and ruck and just felt like I had a gas tank for days. Once you get your body very strong and capable, that kind of sets the benchmark for, oh, this is how we're supposed to be. And then when you fall below that, something feels out of whack and you're like, oh, hold on a second, And so to this day, even at 42, there's the two metrics, how you look and how you feel. And if you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, or you feel like you're not quite performing like you used to, that lets you know it's time to tighten up our shot group a little bit. And it's crazy to me to think, but a lot of people have never had a lifestyle where they're putting in hard work all the time, where they're up fucking on the grind. And, if you never played sports as a kid, your parents never invested in teaching you about like proper foods and nutrients, and because a lot of times the parents don't even know.
100%. And
then you get a job in tech where you're sitting in front of a screen all day. By the time you're 25, you're morbidly obese and you don't know any different. Mm-hmm. And that's our whole fucking country right now, bro.
Oh, I wear the Whoop strap. Had a guy recommend that to me. And the amount of data I get from that thing that I'm like, I've actually thought about it. When I was in my 20s and early 30s, corporate sales guy, construction management, all we did is drink and travel.
Yeah.
I'm like, gosh.
Just zero recovery.
Oh, it had to be like single digits for months.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how'd you get to 300 pounds? Well, that's how. Like right now, my recovery this morning is like in the yellow. Because we rolled late last night, had a couple beers with the guys, and, I don't sleep very well, so my recovery is naturally usually lower.
Yeah.
But you at least have something to look at.
For sure.
You have continual feedback because, my continual feedback before I actually started paying attention, thanks to Dr. Baker and some other people, was I think I'm okay. I can still do all the things I want to. But
and bro, the shit sneaks up on you too.
Oh yeah.
One
bad injury, I said I've broken a leg.
Yeah.
Oh, that would send me off the cliff, right? You're walking the razor's edge.
Yeah.
And you have a bad injury, you get in a car wreck or something happens, you're never coming back. You were so far down that if something catastrophic were to happen,
100%, man,
you're smoked.
Like I had a friend of mine, he held the Marine Corps PFT record for a while.
Wow.
Where I believe he got 5 in a row. Like, it's just absolutely fucking unbelievable. Because you have to run 3 miles at a 6-minute pace. So he did that 5 times back to back, right?
Right.
He got in a motorcycle wreck and was fucking bound to a hospital bed for like a month or 2. And he's like, my body got so weak and fragile. He goes, the first time I could stand, I went and looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, what have you become? Like all disgusted. I was like, well, bro, I mean, come on, consider the circumstances, Right. But that's someone that was elite.
Mm-hmm.
going through that.
Yeah.
If your baseline is already like fat, sick, and weak, and that's where what happens, good luck.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I never did serve. I have a lot of friends that served. We have, you know, people we do business with that served. And people want to say, man, I don't know how people survive some of the injuries. It's because they were in elite shape.
Yeah, for sure, bro.
And they were around other people that were in elite shape that could get them on a bird to get them the hell out of there if something went bad.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention physical shape, but mentally.
Yeah.
They were committed to what they were doing. Like, there's so many different things that physically speaking, we are not capable of if we don't mentally consider ourselves capable.
Isn't that a crazy thing that's starting to become more and more understood and also more and more accepted mainstream, is that the power of the mind is not only equal but surpasses the power of the body. And through all the different things, through like manifestation, visualization, like just self-belief, all of these things, all the most successful people in the world are now like saying, yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, the cold plunge. You know, I was a big old punk this morning. If you look at the security footage, you're going to laugh.
So you'll be happy to hear I don't have a camera on the plunge. It's out of view. So yeah, it's just so listeners know, you know, after Shawn Baker connected us, and it was funny too, because he goes, hey, this guy, Jeff, that I'm doing some work with on the beef side of the house, he's a jiu-jitsu guy too. So you guys should link up because he's going to be out here. And you called me, and I think we talked about beef for about 2 minutes, and then we talked about jiu-jitsu for 35?
For sure.
And then you showed up and you trained last night and you crashed at the academy, and you got up and we got the sauna and the cold plunge, and you're like, fuck yeah, let's give this stuff a try.
Yeah, and the cold plunge was like 1,000 dwarves stabbing me in the leg with needles. And I did get in, but only enough to say I got in and not enough to claim that I like it.
Yeah.
So,
well, dude, anybody that claims that they like it, I question the validity of their words.
right.
Now, you will get to a point where it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't scare you, because there's always a little voice that's like, okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
But you're comfortable with your decision because you've done it so many times. And that cold feeling on your fucking skin, there's always going to be a voice in your head that's like, God, get out of here. Horrible. This sucks, you know? But you learn to control that voice. And it's to the point now, I mean, I think it's literally been like 7 years of consistency in ice water for me, where I don't go more than a few days without a cold plunge. And there's literally no like reaction anymore.
So,
you know?
So if you had a pool out back, I feel like I could jump in that pool way easier.
Yeah.
Stepping in the cold plunge that's, you know, calf deep. And now you got to put your ass in it. And it's just like, as you get further back, it's a mental game.
It's funny you say that, because we live, we're right here on Lake Stevens. It's about a 3-minute drive from the gym. And it used to be a nightly practice for the team, as 4, 5, 7 of us would drive to the lake and do post-training cold plunge in the lake. Mm-hmm. And I would always, the area that we go has like a very slowly sloping, like sandy gravel bottom. So I would just walk in. And then there's other teammates that are like, I don't know how you guys fucking walk in. They'd do the opposite. They'd walk to the same depth on the dock and then just jump in.
100%. That's what I do.
Yeah, so you're one of them.
Yeah, I'll go full send, but the mental mind games in my head of like, oh, now we're going to sit in the water. Now we're going to lay it all the way. But I was just like, God, this is torture. Like,
dude, me and Danny, my fucking black belt that you met last night, we were out there one night and it was snowing. It was like fucking December or something.
So PD shows up to be like, somebody's trying to kill themselves.
Yeah, we do. We have people, there's like old ladies particularly would stop and be like, are you okay? Especially when you're alone. Yeah, if you're out there with a guy or two, it's like, oh, okay, they're doing some crazy thing.
Are you okay? No,
but when I was
not, but I'm still going to get in the water.
I'd go out there alone very often, and you get people that would pull over and get out and be like, oh, do you need help? It's like, nope, just chilling for a few minutes. But dude, this one night, me and Dan were out there, and this car stops, and these 2 girls get out, and they're like, what are you guys doing? But it was dark because it was winter after training. I mean, our gym runs a little late, so we're usually not getting out of here till like 8 p.m. So it was dark, and I couldn't really I thought they were women, right? Like, and I was like, what are you doing? It's like, we're doing fucking cold therapy. Like, you guys are crazy. I was like, why don't you give it a try? And bro, both these girls like stripped down to like their bra and their panties, and then walked out and jumped off the dock and came over to us. And bro, they were like 16. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck, dude? Like,
I've overplayed my hand.
I got to get the fuck out of here. I was like, all right, yeah, nice meeting you guys. Like, you should probably get out of the water. Like, because, dude, I was thinking like, because, dude, I'm fucking 38 years old or something.
Were you selling PD at the time?
Fuck, I don't remember. It was either while I was a cop or right before I got hired by the port.
Okay.
But regardless, I'm like, dude,
this is a bad optic.
this is a bad optic. If I drove by and saw my 14-year-old or Gwen or the 17-year-old with some 38-year-old man in her fucking bra and panties out in the lake, there would be a fight to the fucking death, dude.
Yeah. Might be a gun involved.
Yeah, it's like, all right, lesson learned. Yeah. I got to get the fuck out of here right now. Right. But it's fucking crazy, bro.
Yeah, the things we get ourselves into, right?
I know, right? I should have known better. Don't invite people into the lake with you under low light conditions.
I believe that's bad intel, right? You just had incomplete intel.
Yeah, exactly. So fuck, man. I know you kind of touched on it. Like you and your wife decided to start the company. Mm-hmm. You said she was 5th generation rancher though.
Yep.
So she was already.
So she's a 5th generation rancher with a master's degree in cow nutrition. She is.
I don't even know what that means.
She is full on committed in the cow world.
So is her whole family part of what you're doing, or did you guys started this own thing separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we carved it out. My father-in-law is a great guy. I mean, he's 68 years old with a 6-pack, former professional bull rider. He's ran the ranch, the family ranch, since the mid 70s. Great guy. And we were talking to him in 2015 before we moved back to the ranch. And we were standing in the barn. It was raining, and we were talking about succession planning and who takes over what and how does it want to go. And I'm a business nerd, so I asked him, Dave, I know enough about your business model to be dangerous. Can this model continue? And he said no. That's a fucking kick in the nuts.
So when he said no, meaning the capacity at which he was currently running the ranch, he didn't think?
Not really. So he's got a very defined skill set that's very, very, very good. But, man, to download the data from him,
yeah,
it would just be impossible. And then if you consider where he operates, like in the cattle space and consolidation in the industry, he doesn't see a long-term path for that. He's like, you have to find a way. And then, me being the money dork, return on capital investment in that type of a space, without getting into the details, is somewhere around 5 to 6%. That is hot garbage from a retirement or from a return standpoint. And not to mention, it's 5 to 6% when you have millions of dollars on the line. Mm-hmm. That's a bad deal. He does it really well. He's very, very good at what he does, but he's like,
and that was just the way in which they were operating. That was normal to them, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so the industry really in the cattle space has changed a ton in the last 70 years. So for the last 50 years, he's ran the ranch. So he's been able to adapt and move. But when we need to make that big transition from him operating to someone else, whoever that may be, you aren't going to be able to continue what he's been doing.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I asked him, this is a good example of one of the constraining factors, was, you've lived through the 70s and the 80s and high interest rates and crazy fuel prices and all these other things when banking was really relaxed. Well, banking regulations now are incredible in a bad way.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working in agriculture with operating lines, et cetera. And I asked him, I said, how many mistakes did you make learning what you do that in today's banking climate would have made you unbankable? And he said dozens.
Well, yeah, there's your answer then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying what he does is risky, because he's very good at what he does, but to continue that model without the bankroll, without the 50 years of experience is just not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
And so we looked at our skill set. You know, Kara's got this great background in animal nutrition. She's spent the last decade selling to veterinarians. I mean, she's very, very technical, but she was in sales. I come from sales. I come from a finance background. Well, okay, we can figure out the money. We can do sales. We can raise good product. We're in really the breadbasket of where cattle are produced in the country from an economic standpoint, so we can be very competitive. Okay, let's give this thing a shot. And what we really focused on is not, oh, we're going to do 10 steers this year and then try to maybe do 20 next year. We invested almost 6 figures in a website and market research, and we went full send because we didn't want to compete with everybody in our backyard that's selling to everybody in the next neighbor backyard.
I see.
We said, no, we're going national shipping. We're going to operationalize this thing. Luckily, that's my background, is the process management. How do we get it done? And we were able to kick up the company. We started it in 2017. We started shipping beef in 2018 and just went from there.
How did you anticipate, like, you're going full send? Did you anticipate blowing up early and like having to manage that amount of product, anticipating like a lot of orders coming through, or was it something kind of trial and error as the company grew?
The whole, and actually that's a great segue into kind of what we've been working on. Our biggest issue was when you produce your own cattle, because a lot of these companies that sell direct to consumer are not ranchers. They are sourcing meat.
I see.
They are tech companies that built a really good platform and they source meat from other ranches. And I'm not saying that's bad. What I am saying is some of them play on the line of transparency where they're maybe not telling the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, we don't have to do that. We have our own ranch. We took down our own feed yard that we operate in October. And then recently we completed acquisition of the beef harvest facility that we've been using for the last 5 years.
Okay.
So now we own the supply chain top to bottom.
Okay.
Full stop.
So then you're breeding your own cattle.
That's the one thing we don't do. We're not set up for the cow-calf deal.
Got it.
But there are cow-calf herds all around us. So we source calves.
I see.
Usually before they hit the ground. We know what we're buying from who, the health protocols that we have as our standards to get into our program, and we regulate everything all the way through.
Got it.
And once they come off the mother cow, they come to us, and we manage the entire rest of the process. And then with this new acquisition of the harvest facility, we're going to actually close loop that entire process where as we harvest cattle, we can take yield information, grade information, gain information, and give it back to the ranchers that produce those calves so they can make business decisions to be more economical. So that's the hope.
I see.
So if we look at the typical direct-to-consumer industry, without naming names, there's a few of them that are very well known that source meat from where they can get it. One of the big companies, actually, most of their beef comes from Australia and New Zealand. And to find that out, you have to drill down in their website and know exactly where to look because they are not transparent.
They got it all hidden away.
100%.
Yeah. So how many do you say head of cattle? Am I phrasing that right?
How many head?
How many head do you have like on your ranch at any given time?
So that's cyclical based on the time of year. So we can't run cattle in the winter on grass because we'll detonate the surface level of the forage, and then you'll actually turn it into a dust bowl.
Okay.
So through 2 weeks from now, we're actually shipping all the yearlings off the ranch. So our section, we just have 100 or 110 in our section, but the family ranch is well into the thousands.
Okay.
And there are some cattle that my father-in-law raises that hit our health standards, so they come into the program. We've now got some partner ranches that are contributing cattle to the program as we scale, because as you scale, working capital is a big thing because all of a sudden you need to own 1,500 cows, and at this point, those cattle are worth about $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little $3 million working capital walking around eating hay every day. So there's just a lot of different things that as you scale, think about your school, right? You don't coach every class, right?
Yeah, no.
You just can't. Like, if you wanted to, that's cool. You'd have more gray hair. Maybe you'd have more money, but I would probably argue from an economic standpoint, you wouldn't, because you'd be so burned out. You'd be missing other parts of your business operation that were actually less efficient.
Yep. And then the other thing is like what I found is having kind of a decentralized command and letting other people fill leadership roles. It makes the whole gym kind of rise up because people take more ownership in it as well.
Yep. And that's where we're at with the beef company is, Colorado Craft Beef was founded by Kara and I. But it wasn't founded to be the Kara and Jeff Beef Show.
Mm-hmm.
It was founded to show cattle ranchers there's another way. And we are trying to lift up other cattle ranchers. I've actually probably spent, I probably spend 2 to 4 hours a month on the phone with our competitors trying to help them.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, people that are...
Andy Frisella talks about that a lot too.
You should, man.
Because he's like rising tides lifts all ships.
Yeah.
And, if you want the industry to succeed as a whole, the people to your left and right, as long as they're not shitty people, why wouldn't you help them?
Well, and that's where I'm at. If you as a cattle rancher are being transparent and not demonizing the other side of the industry, because that's the big one, because, some grass finished guy will be like, oh, the grass finish is the best and this is why we got to do it, because he's trying to sell product. I get it, but it's not the best. It might be the best where you're at, but in agriculture, I mean, we have micro regions, like literally the ranch from east to west. This is a great example. Last summer, massive rain event, huge storm rolls through. On the far west side of the ranch where my mother-in-law lives, they got 5 inches of rain.
Dang.
3 miles east of that, and mind you, this is overnight, so
a
little bit of water. 3 miles east of that is my father-in-law's home place. He got 3 inches of rain. We're 1.5 miles east of that. We got 1. Well, do you think there's going to be a grazing difference across the ranch based on that water load?
Yeah, of course.
100%.
Yeah.
But that's where everybody's like, you got to do intensive rotational grazing. You got to do it like this. I'm like, man, Will Harris was on Rogan's show, and I actually emailed Will because he was very cooperative in his conversation about ag. Like, hey, there's certain people that cannot make these type of moves because they're so committed in an industry. He used the cotton industry, for example. Like a cotton picker is $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
No question. Well, but typically if you're a cotton farmer in a small region, all those cotton gins where all the cotton goes to be made into bales to then go to textile mills are typically owned as a co-op with a bunch of the local producers. So you own cotton pickers. You are partners in the local gin. You can't make a business move to leave that because you're so pot committed. And that's the way the ag industry is built.
Mm-hmm.
So to go direct to consumer and then go direct to consumer in a way that is material enough to feed your family and not make it a hobby, that's a totally different tranche.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are in the direct to consumer space, or especially the direct to consumer buyers, the actual consumers, are not aware of that. They don't realize how siloed you have to be in agriculture, because as we've grown Colorado Craft Beef, and we'll get into some of the business deals we've been able to put together later. But as we start to get into the non-traditional agricultural operation sector,
mm-hmm.
and the banks don't like it.
Okay.
They're like, that's weird. I don't like that. That's not super traditional. We gotta really watch this operating line or whatever. So as you start to do really well, and you're like, hey, I have proof that we are going to get bigger. I have proof that we are doing this well. I have proof that it's profitable.
Yeah, you can show the trajectory you're on.
To them, that's projections. They don't give it.
They don't give a fuck.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Well, they basically, if a cow is worth $2,000, they'll loan you $1,500 on that cow.
Mm-hmm.
They'll loan you 75% loan to value until you overcommit, and then they own it all. But in their mind, the way they look at it is it's asset values, right? Like it's easier to buy a house than a car because you can't steal the house.
Yeah.
Same concept, just at a bigger scale. And if you have cattle and the bank needs to call your note, they can literally pull trucks in, load them, take them to a sale barn. They're converted to cash that day.
Really?
All day long.
Repos on cattle, huh?
Basically. Oh, it's very common.
Something you said a minute ago, you said like the grass-fed, grass-finished model
mm-hmm.
may not be the best for a specific area or whatever.
Sure.
Can you just kind of break down the different ways? Like some cows are grass-fed and then not grass-finished, right? Or grain-finished, but just kind of talk through the different modalities that mm-hmm. ranchers may raise their animals in.
So the first thing we have to understand is the definition of grass-fed. Grass-fed means a cow fed a diet that doesn't contain grain.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing to understand is that's every cow. Everything you eat was grass fed at some point.
Okay.
If you then have a grain finished versus grass finished, so the finishing side is the big part of it.
When you say finishing, is it what time period of their life is that?
It's the last 100 to 150 days,
Okay.
typically. So like the beef you got yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
that animal would have been around 2 years old. And from the time they hit the ground, they were destined to go in a box. That was their job. And when we run the whole process, we get them all the way through. We manage everything. They go into the harvest facility. They hit the box, all the things. Well, so they're on pasture. Or during the winter, you could be grass fed in a feed yard because you can't leave them out all winter. We had 58 inches of snow last year.
Yeah. They're not eating grass out in the field.
They're not. So you have to store feed. And you can do that silage or hay, or you can use byproducts. You can use a lot of things. But in general, the big discrepancy or big difference in the two fed beef markets is grass finished and grain finished.
Okay.
Grass finished is they never ate grain ever. But the interesting thing, much like, the nutraceutical world, there's a freaking loophole in every one of these definitions.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
yeah, it's like when things are organic. Yeah.
Yeah, we could go way deep on that. But in general, if you say a cow was grass finished, you can feed them peas, and peas have 95% the feed value of corn because peas are a legume. They're technically a grass.
Oh, okay. So there's a bunch of little loopholes.
There's a
like
ton
always.
of loopholes. Yeah.
Why are people drawn towards grass fed, grass finished? Does it just sound good? I mean, or when it comes to actual like the nutrients of the meat, what are we looking at difference wise?
So the general talking point on grass finished is some people will say it's a lower carbon footprint. It's not.
Okay.
Some people will say it's better for the animal. I think you could make that argument, just to be totally transparent. Grain finishing, imagine us at a buffet every day.
Yeah.
I mean, you can choose what to eat. No, let's be fair. Those cattle are all happy. They have a great life. They get, two meals a day. They're formulated by a nutritionist. But would they be happier in South Texas in December eating grass? Yeah, probably. But we're in Colorado.
Yeah,
that's not the option.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the big deal that the grass finished proponents talk about a lot is, you're higher in omega-3s and you're higher in this and you're higher in that.
I see.
Well, the general math is, yes, it's higher. And some people say it's as much as two times more. Well, but it's such a low amount. 2 times more of 0.01 is 0.02. Mm-hmm. It's not materially different. It is a talking point, but it doesn't really matter from a nutrition standpoint. Dr. Baker and I were talking about this yesterday, actually. And it's like, if you're worried about the omegas, eat some fish.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the big thing when you talk flavor on a steak, you've eaten venison and you get a little bit of gamey tinge. Yep. That's the same thing you get with grass-finished beef, except it's exceptionally more noticeable because you have a lot more fat on a beef animal. And from a tenderness standpoint, we age all of our beef for 21 days as a carcass before we break it into steaks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you'll notice that.
Okay.
But
so you just hang them in a meat locker? Or?
At the harvest facility.
Okay.
So at the harvest facility, there's a hot box that
what does that mean?
So right off the harvest floor, they go in a different cooler that has a higher air exchange rate, so it can bring the temperature on the carcass down in 24 hours. Otherwise, it takes too long. You can get bone sour. There's a lot of other things that can happen mechanically to the meat that are not a good experience for the consumer. And then they move from that hot box into a carcass cooler, and they hang just like you would do with a deer. You usually hang them for a week or 10 days, or you hang a bear for 2 weeks because you're trying to let all that connective tissue kind of break down.
I see.
So we hang all the carcasses for 21 days before they're broken into steaks. If you have a grass-finished animal, you don't have a fat cover on that carcass. And since you don't have that fat cover, because you've broken down deer, right? Well, what is that?
Exactly one deer. So.
Okay, one deer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was making assumptions. So, but if you break that down, you get this thin layer of pericarp is what it's called, but it's like the shell. Well, if you have a grass-finished beef, there's no fat. So that shell is the meat, and the meat can go rancid, so you can only hang it for 3 or 4 days.
I see.
Sometimes a couple of weeks if you're getting real crazy, but then you have yellow fat, and that's a whole other discussion about flavor. But on a grain finished steer, you have a fat cap, and you trim that fat cap. There's no waste.
I see.
And that meat is insulated, so you can age everything for 21 days. So when you buy a filet from us, you can almost cut it with a fork.
Wow.
So it's a flavor, it's a texture thing. And then to that degree, since it's hung for 3 weeks, there's a lot lower water content. So when you get a pound of filet, it's not 30% water.
I see. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it seems like, you know, what the health industry is preaching is always changing, right? And for a while, fat was bad, you know? And I always wondered if that was part of that, like, less fat, you know? But and when it comes to flavor, obviously more fat makes your steaks exponentially more delicious. That's why ribeyes are my favorite.
The Maillard reaction, man.
Yeah.
Malliard. As you char the fat, there's a chemical change. It's called the Maillard reaction. That's what creates the flavor.
Really?
Yeah. Next time you're bored and you can't sleep, just look that up.
Just look that up? All right. But I mean, also, like, we're now learning that fat is actually not bad for you.
That's how your brain works.
In fact, yeah, it's what feeds your brain. It's part of a lot of hormone development. Like, and I'm not on a carnivore diet right now. I'm doing a different, like a bodybuilding plan with a decent amount of carbohydrates. But when I'm on carnivore, I feel fucking good. You know, I just always like to try different things. That's 100%. Why I was like, let's see what's up with a bodybuilding plan, you know, and I'm enjoying it, eating a lot of chicken and rice. And, that's basically like the whole staple of this diet. But when I'm on carnivore, I can't eat enough fat. Like I'll go out to dinner and, you know, some people cut the fat off of their steaks.
Blasphemy.
I'm like, fucking gay. Throw that over here, you know? But when I'm not on carnivore, I'm not drawn to that to the same extent. It's like your body knows what nutrients it needs, and then that's what it craves.
Yeah. Dr. Baker and I did a 2-hour YouTube live yesterday where we just cooked steak, and as people fired in questions, we answered.
That's fucking cool.
Oh, we just had a good time. And
did he sous vide them?
No, we went straight grill because it was just a ribeye and a tenderloin.
Okay.
But we had people asking, you know, on carnivore, I don't feel like I can eat enough. What I learned on carnivore, losing a ton of weight, was fat was the only thing that would regulate my intake of food.
I see.
So I ate a ton of fat.
Like it would satiate you and make you feel full.
Yeah. Well, and then if you think about the metabolic reaction, or you think back to paleo times, if you aren't eating fat, your body's going to store fat. Your body's going to store what it thinks it needs.
Yeah.
So if you're eating extra fat and you want to burn fat, that's actually the way to do it, because your body says, oh, I have extra fat. No problem. This fat I'm taking in, I will convert immediately to energy. We don't need to store anything. So if you're eating stuff that's too lean, especially as somebody that's overweight, and no judgment because I am speaking from experience.
Yeah.
That's how you get the fat to go away.
Well, dude, I tell people all the time, because like, I think the healthiest way to lose a massive amount of weight in a lifestyle that's sustainable is just fucking meat and fruit.
Yeah.
Like, that's it, man. I did it for a very long time, and I've seen it work for a lot of my students. The one thing I think, like, if you have 40 pounds to lose, you don't need to be worried about a cutting diet where you're trying to get
you're not trying to shred out.
Yeah. Like right now I'm weighing every gram of food and I'm counting every calorie, but that's because I'm trying to get down to 5% body fat. That's very different than someone that's trying to lose 40 pounds. And I think the easiest way to lose that 40 pounds is exactly that. Just cut out all the bullshit, eat meat and fruit and drink water, and you're going to fucking see massive results, dude.
I forgot who was on Stump's podcast, but he had somebody that's like, don't eat the cellophane. If it's in cellophane, don't eat it. I was like, man, I wish I'd have known that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the stuff in the cellophane tastes the best.
Well, it's like, you know, one thing they have been saying for a while is like, shop the perimeter.
100%.
You know what I mean? Because the perimeter's real foods.
Yeah.
And then all that bullshit in the middle, outside of maybe oatmeal, you know?
Well, and as the guy that lost a ton of weight, man, the thing that I had to learn with myself was, where's my home base? Where can I go back to keep myself from sliding?
Yeah, because dude, like if you're not implementing a lifestyle and it's just a diet, well, what does that mean when the diet's over?
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's where a lot of Americans struggle, because it's like, hey, I did Jenny Craig, or I did Weight Watchers, or
75 hard.
Yeah. Like,
how many guys do that and get shredded? And
yep.
like 2 months later, you're like, you did all that for what?
Yeah, exactly, bro.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, and fuck, I'm guilty of that too. I did 75 hard last summer and looked like a fucking fitness model at the end of it. I was like, this is awesome, right? And it is. Yeah. It has a lot of.
But is it sustainable?
It builds mental resilience. It teaches you about yourself. But you're exactly right. Like, I'm looking, and here I am again doing another program. But when I'm off of my programs, what I found is I'm off of my program, and then that's when the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to find something that's long-term sustainable. And that's where I think meat and fruit is probably the fucking answer.
Well, what I had to, I had to learn where my home base was. Like, if, you go on vacation for 10 days and you come home, like, how do you reset?
Yeah.
That was a big deal for me. But the next thing I had to come in terms with within my own brain was, I'm not going to trade this horrible relationship with food, where I was eating all the wrong things and gaining weight and treating myself like crap, for this inverse horrible relationship with food where it controls me in a different way.
Yeah.
You gotta land
that's a very
in the
interesting
middle.
way of looking at it.
Well, because it's not sustainable on either end.
Yeah.
I
like that. I think that's a good perspective that I probably need to hear, because my life is peaks and valleys. Sure. Like, I'm either on or I'm off.
Well, so's everybody, right?
And it's hard to it's hard to walk that balance in the middle, Well,
and it's okay to, you don't want to go to your 3-year-old nephew's birthday party and not have the cake. Don't be weird.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to have cake every day.
No, you're right.
And it's learning that balancing act, because the number of people that are on carnivore diet that used to be vegan is incredible. They are extreme to extreme to extreme to extreme, which is fine if that's what you're into. But as you know, like, if you have an op tempo, you guys are banging 2 targets a day. You can do that for a while.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not sustainable long term.
But if they tell you, hey, you're going to bang 2 targets a day for 2 weeks, and you're going to do nothing for the 2 weeks after that, and all you do is live in the extremes, and the mental game you have to play, the gymnastics that are going to go on between your ears, all the other shit that compiles on that, like, total extreme, you don't learn how to function.
Yeah.
It's just always on or always off. And that's where...
And I've kind of always liked operating in that space. Yeah. I feel like in my 40s, I'm finally trying to find balance,
Yeah. Brad, you know who Brad Lee is?
Brad Lee?
Brad Lee. His last name is Lee, Lea. He's a sales consultant, finance type guy. He's buddies with Cardone and a bunch of them.
Okay.
I saw a post he put up, probably a month ago, and he talked about balance. He goes, everybody talks about work-life balance. He goes, I'm here to tell you, it's never going to be balanced. He goes, you're going to have to give 110% to this project, and your family's going to suffer. And then you're going to give 100% to the family. He goes, that's just math.
Yeah.
He goes, you're never going to give 70% to everything, or you'll only get 70% out of everything. I was like, holy shit, that is a nugget. He's like, and you got to go full send sometimes. He goes, but you have to realize what you're neglecting at the time and go back and repair that. And repair is probably a harsh word, but you have to
there's validity to it too.
You have to reinvest, right?
Like, if one aspect of your life is suffering.
Yeah. Like, if you want to run your whole business based on sales numbers, yeah, you can do that. But there's a whole other slew of metrics you can look at that would probably give you a more refined picture.
Yeah.
And so that I took that when he read that, I was like, man, that is on the ball. I like that, because everybody thinks, oh, everything needs to be perfect, and we need to have this perfect symbiotic relationship. Man, you're going to have peaks and valleys all day long. But how do you keep the peaks and valleys from feeling like you're going from, Death Valley to the top of Everest? Where do you at least find or enjoy the ride, enjoy the up and down, instead of being like, man, I was on Everest yesterday, and today, man, I'm 6 feet under Death Valley. It got so bad. And people get surprised with those peaks and valleys. It's like, man, how do you modulate internally?
One thing I always tell people when this topic comes up is the only alternative to peaks and valleys is neutrality.
Yeah.
Who wants to live there either?
Right.
Right. So if you want to have high highs, it's the yin and yang of life. You're going to have some low lows, or you can just fucking cruise in neutrality. And that ain't for me, bro.
No. Well, and a lot of people, though, I think they want to live in the highs or the lows. they can't modulate past that center line.
Yeah.
Like as if they come off of a valley, they hit center line and they're like, well, I'm going to go down again. I'm not going to get too excited. And then they live in this, bottom tier functionality because they don't want to commit to how awesome something is.
Have you ever went through any bouts like depression or that kind of stuff where like all the bullshit of life just seems to be compounding and it seems like you're in more of a valley than a peak for a prolonged period of time?
Luckily, no.
Luckily, no. That's pretty awesome, bro.
I thrive in positivity.
So here's the weird thing about it, because like a lot of veterans, I went through that kind of like just that transition into the new life outside of the military, outside of deployments. And there's something about the feeling of like feeling depressed that you start to almost have like a relationship with. And then when you don't feel it anymore, even though it doesn't feel good, you kind of miss it. And I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Oh, sure.
But it's almost like an abusive relationship. Like a woman that's in
Stockholm
that.
syndrome.
Yeah, a woman that's in that knows it's not good for her. It's not healthy. But for some reason, there's something about it that still draws her in.
Well, and I think there's an interesting conversation to be had on that. Because I love my folks to death. We didn't have a lot growing up. And by the time I was 30, I was in a position, probably further advanced than my family's ever been. And my sister's right behind me doing awesome stuff too. So we didn't come from a spot where there was like this expectation of performance. We came from this, lower end. Anything you do past here is awesome. Well, man, even if you fall back to where you were, that's where you were. You know it. What's the worst that could happen? So it's this mental like landing zone that you're like, whatever, I can figure it out. As opposed to my wife, 5th generation rancher. And I talked about this on Andy's podcast. If you guys are on a team and you're, kicking indoors, you fuck up and your buddy behind you pays the price. Whew, man, can't begin to know what that is. Kara has that same thing in her head because she's the 5th generation on a family ranch that's made it work for 110 years.
I see. So yeah, that just comes with expectations.
Yeah.
And even if those people don't feel that, she's still going to set those on herself.
I had a buddy of mine that we were talking to. He's a Marine machine gunner, came out of Fallujah. Great buddy of mine. He actually works for the company. And he goes,
he was the one that told the captain, get the fuck out of the way.
I believe he yelled at the gunner, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Shout out to Jay. He'll be like, man, you tell that story too much. But like, I knowing Jay as well as I do, I can only imagine, Lance Corporal Jay on a turret gun with shit going sideways. Because, we talk internet marketing. And there was one day a couple weeks ago, I was like, man, how is it? Nobody's shooting at me, dude. It's pretty good today.
Yeah. Bro, like war does give you good perspective.
Yeah.
That's one thing it gives you, man. And I don't know what the right answer is when it comes to service and deploying and all that, because I look at our country and I look at our political spectrum and it just makes me wonder, like, man, what the fuck were we doing over there, Yeah. But the other side of it is that's non-negotiable is when you see parts of the world that are war-torn, that are living in poverty, that are like, don't have any of the amenities that we have here, it gives you perspective. It makes you appreciate what we have.
Yeah.
And that's half or more than half of the world.
Oh, way more.
You know what I'm saying?
Like I think
the human experience is so fucking different for most people outside of America. But if you've never invested any time to understand that or see that, fuck, man, people just don't understand.
Well, I think the last metric I saw, and forgive me, I'm sure this is dated, but it was if you had clean water, 1 meal a day, a roof over your head, and shoes, you were in the top 1% of the world.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, and I don't know the validity, even if that's 10%. That is incredible. You're in the top 10%.
Even if it's 50%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
that means there's a lot of suffering.
A lot of suffering. That's right, man.
And that's where the grass finished, grain finished, everybody's complaining. I'm like, man, you know what? There's some people in Western Africa right now. They got one problem. I go, they're hungry people. How many problems they have? Man, they got a lot. Fuck you. They are hungry. Well, everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah. I say it all the time. Like if you got to understand there's cultures in the world right now where your job is to go fetch a pail of water and hope that you don't get eaten by a fucking dinosaur.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a real thing,
or
dude.
wrecked by a hippo.
Yeah.
It's not even going to eat you. They're just going to wreck you because they can.
And here's the most fascinating part of that is all of these cultures that are still immersed in reality. Mm-hmm. Like if they don't mind their P's and Q's, their heads aren't on a swivel, they don't go about their day doing their daily tasks in the manner that they need to, it literally impedes their survival. Mm-hmm. We don't have that in America anymore. And I honestly think that's why we see all of these issues with depression, ADHD, all of these mental illnesses, all these addiction problems. I think this world has to come with a certain amount of suffering. And if your exterior environment doesn't provide the suffering, man, we go inward and we find that suffering.
That was The Matrix.
What?
Well, do you remember that? The Matrix, or Keanu Reeves back in the
I haven't seen
90s?
The Matrix like since it came out.
There was, well, forgive me.
I do remember Mr. Anderson.
Yeah,
because I've heard
go.
that 10 million times in my life.
Right. Well, so I've fortunate enough to have a brain that just remembers a ton of random shit. Occasionally my wife looks at me and she's like, why do you have RAM space dedicated to that? I'm like, I didn't know that I did. It just came up. Yeah. But in that movie, they talk about, they created this utopia for the people that were living in the pods that they were, gaining. The machines were farming people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they said, we created this perfect environment where nobody had anything to worry about, and it imploded because humans need chaos.
Yeah.
Now, that's Hollywood in the late 90s, so, take that with 10 or 12 grains of salt. But I think you're right.
Well, bro, like, the world was chaos until 100 years ago.
Sure.
And just like we said, and it's still chaos in many parts of the world. All the little things, like just fucking having a warm house, turning a faucet on, like going to the grocery store to buy your meat, which a lot of people don't understand comes from an animal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, we're so out of touch with just the day-to-day things that we're struggle. Like, dude, if you didn't want to freeze to death in the winter, you better build a nice shelter and you better fucking you better chop a lot of firewood. Like, the things that don't seem like life-changing, but back then they were. Mm-hmm. If you didn't take the time to do that, you fucking froze to death. Or if you didn't take the time to harvest food when food was available, you fucking starved to death. Mm-hmm. So all of these little things.
Or if you did everything right and Mother Nature hosed you.
Yeah.
You had to figure it out.
Or you did everything right and the rival horde on the other side of the valley decided they're going to come and take it all from you.
Yeah.
And kill all your women. Like crazy shit. Mm-hmm. When people were living in that capacity where day in and day out, I had to do these things just to ensure survival, they didn't have time to deal with fucking ADHD.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, fuck, man.
So there's a guy, I'll have to figure out who he is and text him to. He spoke at a Colorado Ag Leadership Program deal that we went to in March. He's a logging advocate. He's out of Montana. Very, very sharp guy. Civil engineer, very good speaker. And he actually put something up on the board that I thought was really cool. He said, we think it's really bad now. He goes, let's look at the last 250 years. Revolutionary War, War of 1812, American Civil War,
yeah,
Spanish-American War, World War I. We're just talking wars. We're not even talking the Civil Rights Movement and other political strife we've had in our country.
Yeah.
And while it does feel not great right now, and there is a trajectory that I am not okay with, we are still in such an amazing place in human history to be in the United States and living how we do, to not have all those problems.
Bro, I honestly think that's why it's worth fighting for.
100%.
That's why it's worth voicing our concerns, seeing the trajectory that it's on, because some of us that are rooted in reality are afraid of losing this because we do appreciate how good it is.
Yeah.
And we could, like I was actually watching a video this morning. You know how like in California, the smash and grabs are just becoming, that's just how people go shopping now.
Right.
They just walk into a store and have a big old bag of shit and just pull it all off the shelves, and that's how they go shopping.
Right.
And I was actually thinking, like, is that the mentality of a lot of Americans is becoming so flawed that they think that that's an okay way to be a member of our society. I don't think that's probably ever taken place before.
Sure.
So we're coming up to these new issues that just simply aren't sustainable.
Yeah, it's an entitlement thing.
It's an entitlement thing. And now, I don't know if you saw this, but it looks like California is trying to pass legislation where if you interfere with someone trying to steal from you physically, you get charged 20 grand.
Wow. We're going to double down on whatever the hell's going on down there.
Isn't that fucking nuts, man?
Yeah.
Can you imagine someone just coming to your ranch and, hey, I'm going to take this, this, and this.
Nope, nobody'd ever hear about it.
Have a nice, have a nice day. You know, fucking weird times we're in, bro.
That's why I live where I do, man. We don't have a neighbor that's not family within 4 miles.
Nice.
So,
well, bro, I think I like that you brought that up because, a lot of people that do think like everything's shit and we're fucked as a country and like there's no hope. If you think there's no hope, then there's no point in even fighting for it.
Yeah.
The reason that we sit down and we talk about this and the reason that like I preach what I preach and the reason I've taken the stands that I've taken is for exactly that. It's because we have our fucking children that we need to ensure have the opportunities that we had.
Yeah.
And if we don't fight for it, I honestly think they could be lost. And that's not me trying to be a fucking negative Nancy doomsday prepper. That's just what I see with my own eyes.
Oh, I definitely think there's room for improvement. I definitely think there's things we need to look at. And, it's a great segue into what we did with the business. The people we partnered with, the moves we made were not from a capitalistic standpoint. They were from a philosophical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So as you know, and none of the listeners know, we recently closed an investment round with the beef company. We brought in a bunch of partners that are all America first,
Yep.
And I've said this a few times. I'm going to try not to choke up doing it, but so my dad's a Vietnam vet. I've got a picture of him at the Pendleton Roundup saluting the flag during the national anthem. That is something that's burned into my brain. It's burned into my heart. There's no way around that. And the only thing in my head that even gets on the same level of American patriotism and the American way of life is a cowboy in a grass pasture pushing cows on a horse.
Fuck yeah, bro.
And if you put those two things together, if you wear a cowboy hat and you go to Europe, they know you're an American.
Uh-huh.
Full stop.
Yeah.
You go anywhere. I mean, I'll take that back. Last time I flew through LA, I was wearing a felt cowboy hat, and people looked at me like I was the weird one. I was like, no, man, I'm cool. Thanks, though.
Well, in LA, you might have been.
I think I was on my way to the rodeo in Vegas, and I was like, yeah, whatever. But so we've partnered up with Jocko and Pete and Brian from Origin. We brought in some other finance guys that we know, and then some other great Americans. Travis Mills is on our team. By the way, the best gallows humor I've ever heard.
Oh, I don't know the guy, but just watching his videos and watching him, like, I love that shit, man. Like, he's went through more shit than fucking anybody we know.
Yeah.
And he fucking makes himself have fun with it.
Dude, he was at Origin Camp, so we went up to Origin Camp and met everybody and had a big steak dinner. And
does he do jiu-jitsu?
As good as he can.
Okay, fuck yeah, dude. For people that don't know, he was a soldier that lost 3 limbs in a 3.5 in an IED.
Southern Afghanistan. Both legs above the knee, right arm is gone, left arm above the elbow. He has a prosthetic in the left arm.
That's fucking crazy.
Well, so the first time I meet him, he comes to camp. I met his wife the night before at the steak deal. He came back from a speaking engagement, and just the nicest guy. And I'm talking to him, and you've probably heard me say it on the podcast. I'm like, yeah, I got you, man. That makes sense. And he looks at me and he goes, that's what the Taliban said. I was like, holy shit. And I was like, and I'm standing with Brian from Origin, and I looked at Brian.
Am I supposed to laugh?
No, I just looked around. I was like, man, I stepped in a bear trap on that one. He goes, man, that's how they got the left leg. How'd you know? I was like, son of a bitch. My wife is dying. Because she's like, I didn't say anything. I just looked at Brian. He goes, dude, he can do this all day.
That's funny, man.
And just, you meet great people like that.
When you say partner, and I mean, I don't know what you can disclose and what you can't, but what do you mean by that? As far as like just helping build the network to.
So they invested.
Okay.
I mean, full on investment. And with the investment money, we closed on the harvest facility to buy the supply chain, to own the supply chain.
I see.
And
that's kind of Origin's I mean, Origin's model is from the dirt to the shirt.
100%.
And so it makes sense that they are investing in a similar process when they're looking at food procurement.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's about supply chains, and it's about America first, and it's about, even helping other people. I mean, the number of people that Origin helps in their verticals just by showing them that there is a way. Pete's had a ton of podcasts with Jocko and some of those guys, and he'll talk about, man, the people that told me we couldn't make our own gis, it's impossible, is the same story that we got from family members, from friends that are like, hey, you can't go direct to consumer in a material way.
It's very bizarre that anytime people want to try something new, that a lot of people's default reaction is, that'll never fucking work.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, one thing that my dad used to say to me ever since I was a little boy is like, bro, if a motherfucker can put a robot on Mars, I can. And then like whatever the challenge is in front of us, And when you look at Origin's story, and for those of you who haven't listened to, it's Pete Roberts from Origin. He told his whole story on Jocko's podcast
a few times.
And it's really fascinating because he wanted to bring back textile manufacturing to the United States. We didn't even have looms here. Like he found the one loom that needed like a massive overhaul. And the dude, he found like a guy that was like 85 that knew how to run it and showed him like all the ropes. And like, that's how they started. And they started building gis. And dude, I'm wearing Origin jeans as we speak.
Yeah.
They're fucking fantastic jeans.
So
fantastic. And their hoodies and their t-shirts, like for sourcing everything in America and making them here, and like the whole supply chain is here. Don't think that they're actually taking any shortcuts on quality. It's the opposite, man. And you're going to pay a little more too.
Same thing with our beef.
Because guess what? We're trying to fucking bring manufacturing back to America, and everybody wants to bitch about China and all this bullshit. Well, then you might pay a little more for your jeans if you're supporting American-made stuff. And we could, they've laid the blueprint down. It could be a viable future, to bring manufacturing back.
Well, to some degree, you have to have it, right? It's a national security issue.
I was just going to say, we don't want to be fucking dependent on other countries for literally everything. I know Andy Frisella is very interested in getting more involved in bringing manufacturing back for all his stuff too.
Sure. Because
a lot of First Form stuff right now is like some of the t-shirts are made overseas, and people are like, you preach America first, and you fucking sell shirts that are made in China. And it's like, give us time. That's what he says. Because if you think this isn't an industry that you can just one day wake up and be like, you know what, we are going to make our shirts here. You literally have to build it from the ground up.
Yeah. So, and that's, Origin, they know the farms in Texas that the cotton comes from to be spun into yarn that then gets ran through the loom to make all the textiles for shirts and gis and everything else. And, is an Origin gi more money? 100%.
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you, it is a damn good gi. Like in everybody, in the jiu-jitsu space, to be like, oh, if you buy a Sanibel or a Rev Gear or whatever, don't dry it, it'll shrink. Well, we're at Origin Camp buying new gis because Brian's like, dude, just leave your gis at home. We got gis here. I was like, that'd be cool. Because you got to wear the appropriate logo.
At Origin Camp, I'm assuming Origin gis are required.
They are not required.
Not required? Okay.
Well, we were shooting video for some of our launch stuff.
I see. Yeah.
For me, it was required. I'm like, that's a optic.
Of course, yeah. You have a partnership forming. Yeah, of course.
And so it was interesting because I was talking to one of the gals that was working in the pro shop, and I said, this A4 is just a little long. I said, it'll shrink, right? She goes, do not count on it.
So are they pre-shrunk, or just the way they weave the materials?
They
don't experience shrinking.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Fieldcraft is launching a jiu-jitsu program.
Yeah.
And I'm actually flying out to Provo next weekend to take part in the grand opening. And me and one of my homies, Greg Lappin, who's a black belt, Greg Lappin's going to head up the actual Provo, Utah jiu-jitsu facility.
Yeah, I saw on Instagram they're laying the mats down.
They're laying the mats today.
Getting ready to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I know they're going to be partnering with Origin too, and having that same America first. He wanted to call it American Jiu-Jitsu initially, right? And I told him, I was like, bro, here's the one thing that might cause is like a riff
with the
Brazilians,
Yeah.
because it's not that American jiu-jitsu is now taking over and Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a thing of the past. It's like we're all the same, right? But
there's a cultural thing you definitely got to be sensitive
exactly.
for. Yeah.
And I mean, I love the lineage and the history of jiu-jitsu too. And it is what it is,
Right.
you know? And my black belt is from fucking some of the most savage Brazilians ever. So I appreciate that for sure. But I think fieldcraft jiu-jitsu is the right approach. And I think it's going to be fucking awesome, because what Mike has said, he's like, you know, jiu-jitsu is one of the things that is going to be the best foundational pillar for just overall preparedness. You know, we already fucking geeked out on it a little bit earlier on in the show, but you have to be able to understand a lot of things about yourself, and it requires a certain amount of physicality. It puts you through a certain amount of adversity. And if that's part of what you do, now the rest of preparedness can be part of your life. But for the fast, I mean, I don't know how long fieldcraft has been in existence, but the jiu-jitsu side of the house isn't something he's decided to start pushing until recently. And it's going to fucking blow up.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
They're going to open a bunch of gyms, and they're going to, like, you saw the fieldcraft logo on our mats, because this is going to be their Pacific Northwest hub.
Oh, nice.
And it's just fucking cool, man.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how all of the networks of people that are of a like mind or on a similar path, they're starting to overlap. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, the network. Well, I think those connections have always existed. I just think they're becoming more prevalent.
For sure.
Because like I went through all my T-shirts, I don't know, 2 months ago. If it's not a buddy of mine's company, I don't have it anymore.
Dude, it's funny you say that, because it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I bring Dan fucking a bag of T-shirts a month practically, just because you know how it is. Once you're in, like, connected with these different spaces, people just send fucking apparel like it's going out of style, you know? And that's the same thing I look through, and it's like, all right, if it's not one of the companies I'm affiliated with or one of my buddies, like, I don't have room in my closet anymore.
Well, and that comes back to, you know, how you spend your money.
Yeah.
Or how you spend your time. You know, what are you doing with your resources as a human? Are you buying whatever is convenient? Or are you going out of your way to support a mission you support?
Yeah.
Or are you going out of your way to make sure the shirt you're wearing, maybe you have no affiliation to Origin, maybe you have no affiliation to, you know, nobody's coming to save you.
Yep.
But you support their mission and you vote with your dollar.
For sure.
And that
Shit's
is
important,
something
man.
people have lost. They don't understand. And I'm like, well, and I get it. To some degree, it's also a resource allocation of, do you have the funds to do that? I mean, we've had people reach out to us before. Actually, I think it was after I was on Andy's podcast. There was a veteran that reached out. He's like, hey, man, you know, money's tight. I can't buy your product. I would love to rep your hat. I just sent him one.
Fuck yeah.
Well, that's what it's about. Like, it's so much. People are like, oh, you got to make money. Well, hell yeah, you got to make a little money. The lights don't turn themselves on.
Well, and here's the other thing, dude. If you're doing all the things correctly, and you are building your business in a way that's going to provide a quality product, enrich people's lives, in your case, like high quality food, high quality nutrients, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to be monetarily rewarded and do well. You know, like, it's a value exchange, and both people walk away winning. If you can create an environment where after the value exchange, both people walk away winning, nobody should have a problem with that. And if you are able to do that 1,000,000 times in a row and make a substantial amount of money, fucking good. You deserve that.
Well, and then,
you know,
and then what are you going to do with that? Are you going to go do some more good things?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Hookers and blow.
Actually, the shirt.
Actually, I'm not going to do that.
So the shirt I'm wearing today is from Heroes and Horses.
What's his name?
Micah Fink.
Micah Fink. I've had a handful of people that are mutual friends is like, you have to meet Micah.
He's a great dude.
Bro, I listen. He's on Cleared Hot episode 200. And it's one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to in my entire life. That fucking dude, just his overall approach to life and for being, I mean, he's about our age, right?
Yeah.
So the amount of wisdom inside of him for being the same age as me is kind of shocking.
Well, it makes you wonder. I mean, he was an SDV pilot in teams. So I suppose if you're in the dark, in the cold for that long, maybe it just cooks your brain a little differently. But so I'm wearing his shirt today. He and I talked a few weeks ago. I called and let him know about the partnership with all the guys. And he goes, I said, hey, man, should we do a Heroes and Horses collab with some product? I've got some ideas that are kind of working in the background.
Is that his 40-day event that he does?
Yeah, it's 42 days.
42 days?
Yeah,
okay.
And he does multiple classes a year. Actually, his big party's next month, the big gala they do. I think we'll be back up there for that.
So for people that aren't familiar with it, he does this program, and kind of the idea behind it is kind of reintegrating veterans into a healthy place. And
I would call it almost like a rehab. Because it's 42 days, you don't leave the place.
You eat fucking meat and vegetables.
And you drink water.
And you're on horseback all day. Yeah.
It's hardcore.
Because one thing that he said on that episode of Cleared Hot that really resonated with me, he goes, man, what I've seen is a lot of programs that are out there to help disabled veterans. They really just perpetuate the problem by making being a disabled veteran like almost like your job. Like, hey, I can go do this. I can go do 3 days of fishing for free because this place offers a disabled veteran whatever, right? Yeah. And then I can go do this, and then I can go do this. And it's like, in their inception, a lot of these companies or a lot of these outfitters that are like, hey, let's allocate this much to a disabled veteran. They're trying to do it from a place of love. They're trying to give somebody that's in a bad spot a memorable experience or bring them some joy. But what they're finding is, that's not really addressing the problem.
Yeah, a 3-day trip to Montana to go fly fishing is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
But if there's real problems, what is that going to address?
Yeah, and what we're finding is it really addresses nothing.
Yeah. Well, and that's, so Jay, our marketing guy, he and I've had this conversation a few times. He's like, man, the number of hunting trips or fishing trips or boating trips I could have went on is insane. He was like, and I never went. He goes, because I didn't feel it would help me, and if it was going to help somebody else more, I didn't want to take it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool, man. Like, and I cannot speak to any of that. That's not my background, but it's just interesting the number of people that want to help. And so, Micah's program, it's 42 days in the mountains. I believe it's the last 14 days. They're on a pack trip in the wilderness on horses, like out in the boonies.
It's fucking cool,
and
man.
It's cold plunges every day. Last year at the gala, they were talking. They showed, full boxing matches.
Oh, really?
Oh,
good,
yeah. They
man.
throw down. They get all the guys together. It's probably what the guys should do coming back from multiple deployments to kind of reset before they go into society. Is that brotherhood, to the psychology of some of that. I can't remember who was talking about it. They're like, if you came back from the Pacific Theater during World War II, you had 2 months on a boat.
Exactly, to really decompress.
Yeah, to talk about what happened, to then, okay, we're going to be home in a week. Okay, we're going to be home in 2 days. Because I know Andy said, like, one of his deployments, it was like, or somebody, like, if right after the nastiest firefight they'd been in, 48 hours later, they're sitting in Coronado.
Yeah.
They're home.
No, I've been there, dude, where it's like, you're a 14-hour flight away and you're walking around Seattle, and it's like, dude, yesterday I was in Ramadi.
Yeah.
What the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
It's a weird place to be, for sure.
I can only imagine.
Fuck, man, I'm not even in a bad place anymore. I've been very upfront with my journey and my mental health throughout this podcast. And I feel like I've been in a good place for a very long time. But more importantly, I feel like I have the tools to recognize if I'm feeling any of those emotions or they start to rear their fucking heads again. I think I'm good. However, man, 42 days in the mountains, cold plunging, eating fucking meat and vegetables. There's something that's appealing about that.
Yeah. Well, and they have.
Does he specifically, not that I even have the fucking ability to leave for 42 days, but does he have some type of like screening process where he picks what he deems the most, the candidates that need that the most? Or do you have any idea how that works?
I don't know how that works.
Okay.
I've heard.
I guess I should have Micah on if I want to talk about Micah's program.
Great dude. What I have heard, I met a couple of his guys at the event last year. And then a really good friend of ours, his cousin, actually went through the program before we met Micah. And so I was talking to my buddy Jimmy, and he's like, dude, my cousin went through that. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And it squared him away.
That's cool.
He was a soldier in Afghanistan, IEDs all over the place, came back with his eggs a little shaken up. And had some struggles. I don't know any of the details. I've never met the guy. This is all third party.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, dude, he went to that program and came back a different human.
Wow.
I was like, okay, how do we have 10 more of those programs? Well, you need 10 more Micahs.
Yep. And I'm assuming, is he immersed with them the whole time?
Yeah. Oh, he lives in it. I mean, those guys, it is as immersive as anything I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what I know from it. Obviously, I've not been there. But just seeing the story and seeing some of the media they put out and talking to him and going to the gala and talking to some of the investors and some of the donors, I mean, it's so crazy. And they're doing a lot of other things. They're building out a compound. They're doing a wellness center similar to what Travis Mills built up in Maine. I mean, the amount of people that are going above and beyond to put people in a place of a real chance to get better is so incredible. And that's why, we do what we can, helping Heroes and Horses or whatever we can do from our small part of the world. Because, man, if we're not all rowing the boat the same way, whether you're using a teaspoon or a fucking motor, do what you can to help. But at the very least, don't be the guy throwing the boat anchor out the back like an asshole.
Yeah, for sure, man. When you decided to go the direct-to-consumer model, was that just from a financial standpoint, or was that something that you felt like you'd have a more intimate relationship with your consumers and be able to build like a stronger brand?
More of the latter.
Okay.
Our bigger mission was we wanted to build a platform to speak from to start to help agriculture.
I see.
Because agriculture, and I'd have to look up the stats. I've seen rumors that they say that the suicide rate for agriculture is only surpassed by veterans.
Really?
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, I know a story of a guy in Oklahoma that took his t-shirt off, lit it on fire, and threw it in an oil tank, killed himself. The hemp crisis and everything that went down when they were trying to do hemp, there was a bunch of farmers that offed themselves. Because in ag, from 1976 to 2016 or so, in the 70s, for every dollar you put into agriculture, you'd get about $1.35 back. Okay. And any business person's like, dude, I'll do that 100 times a day and 200 times on Sunday. That same number today is $1.14.
Okay.
So the profitability of agriculture has went down 60 or 70%. On top of the fact that the cost of capital is way high, the cost of trucks, the cost of tractors, the cost of everything is exceptionally higher. So you're making less money on more money invested. And in general, I've used this metaphor a couple of times. Like I've heard Andy and a lot of guys like yourself talk about the op tempo at the beginning of the war on terror. Mm-hmm. Everybody's like, dude, there's not going to be another mission. Like, we all got to have them. And by 06, everybody's like, bro, whatever.
Yeah.
We know there's enough. Well, that famine mentality exists in agriculture in a way that is crazy. It's 1% to 2% of the population, depending on how you cut the math. And when we look at it, everybody's like, if you sell steak, the other guy didn't sell steak. Well, not really, man. Like, the average American eats like 82 pounds of beef a year. Mm-hmm. I can only raise so many. Mathematically speaking, I'm not even a drop in the bucket. Why are we not helping more people?
I see. So that mentality helps you not look at them as a competitor.
Sure.
It just helps look at like an industry that we should fucking raise each other up.
Yeah. And like if we break down the cattle industry, you have cow-calf operators that have mother cows. You have stalker/yearling operators that are in the middle. Then you have the feed yards. And then you have the packers. Every one of those chains tries to operate independently from a profitability standpoint, as they should, right? They're all different businesses. But the cow-calf guy doesn't care what the packer sees, which is really what the customer sees, the consumer. And they'll say, well, and my wife espouses this quite a lot. She's like, if you go talk to a cow-calf operator, you say, what do you raise? They'll say, well, I have a 600-pound calf that I wean the second week of October. They don't think they raise beef, because they're so disconnected from even the end of that chain. And the beef chain is the most diverse, vibrant American production chain in agriculture, in my humble opinion. And then when everybody says factory farming or things like that, man, that does not really exist in the cattle space.
Well, and I was going to ask you about that. So like when people say that, And you say that doesn't really exist. I guess just unpack that a little bit to kind of dispel any misconceptions.
So if you look at the pork and the chicken industry, most of that is vertically owned.
Okay.
The processor has contracts or at least owns something in the middle, and all the production is top to bottom. They control everything. The beef space is not like that, because chickens, from the time they hatch to the time they go in a box, is a matter of a couple of months. Pigs, it's about 6 months. Cattle, it's like 2 years. You can't control that whole chain all the way through. Like even Cargill and JBS used to own feed yards. They've since divested all of those. They just own the packing houses.
Okay.
So every one of these chains, like the average size of a cow herd in the United States is 30 cows. That's the average. It's very low.
I see.
So
are these huge companies then, they're just buying lots from a bunch of different sources then?
Yeah, they're aggregating. So as you start at the bottom end of the chain with cow-calf producers, and granted, when I say average is 30, there's massive herds out there. Don't get me wrong, like the Deseret Ranch or the Parker Ranch or any of those guys. They're massive.
Would be looking at what?
10 or 20,000 cows.
Okay.
So you have a lot of people with 2, you have a lot of people with 100, you have some people with a few thousand, and then you have 10 or 20 that have a ton of them.
Uh-huh.
But those are typically family operations, and people will say, "Oh, Lord, well, they're corporations." I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's called tax structure, dum-dum." Like you have to play the game.
Yeah.
Because 87% of the food produced in the U.S. is produced by families.
Okay.
Regardless of the business structure.
What the LLC is called.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we didn't go, with our business deal, we didn't go to private equity. We didn't go to institutional funding. We went to people.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to people that share our mission, that when we're rowing our boat, we're also helping their boat and vice versa. And that is one of the things. So if we look at the factory farming model within cows, not existing really, you have thousands and thousands of families that have a few cows that then get sold and bought into yearling and stocker operators like my father-in-law, who run a couple thousand. And then they go to feed yards. And that is probably where you start to get the question of factory farming. But to get the efficiency you need, there's only so much you can do. And to feed the number of people we need to feed, there's only so much you can do. And then when you really get to the factory side, it's actually the packing houses, the big processors, that kill 6,000 cows a day all year long. So during COVID, everybody said, we had this beef shortage. There wasn't a beef shortage. And people will say, we shut down all the packing houses. Some of them slowed down. Some of them stopped temporarily. But by the numbers, the United States harvests around 600,000 cows a week. That's a lot of damn cows.
Yeah.
And the weekly cutout is a report that comes out on Monday that tells you everything that happened the week before, because it's all a commodity. The lowest rate we got to on cattle harvest numbers during COVID was 440 a week, barely 25% lower.
Mm-hmm.
Not that big of a number. I mean, yeah, it slowed down, but it wasn't like, we turned everything off. The issue was, we're in an area, obviously, that's a little more plentiful with resource because there's so many people. But if you're Andy's spot in Kalispell, Montana, and you have a grocery store, they get 1 or 2 protein trucks a week from a wholesaler. There's not an extra semi sitting around ready to deliver extra beef or extra protein to Kalispell, Montana. They just don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So what we had was a supply chain disruption during COVID.
I see. Yeah.
Because the beef was always there. It's just a trucking question, because, a good semi with a reefer van on it's $300,000. They don't just have fleets of those sons of bitches sitting around waiting to go to work. It's a just-in-time delivery model. Same thing with toilet paper. Same thing with all this stuff. Sitting on inventory is expensive. Like, you guys have geese and you sell T-shirts. How much inventory do you have? You have enough to be functional.
Exactly.
But you don't have a warehouse in the back that has 2 Connexes full of T-shirts just in case.
No, and that's interesting you say that, because like our apparel side of the business it's actually growing pretty substantially.
I've seen your shirt in my gym, dude.
Dude, that's fucking rad. But like Jenny always has to, she has a formula where however many sales we make, a certain percentage of it goes right back into reinvesting into just new material.
Sure.
You know, but at the same time, you have to balance that because just like you said, you don't want to be just sitting on shit for fucking an extended period of time. That makes no sense either.
Yeah, but you don't want to miss the opportunity to sell more product.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what's weird when you start thinking about the supply chain and where things start to move.
Well, and that seems, I'm sure that's exponentially more difficult with beef as opposed to shirts, because if you miscalculate anything with shirts, you either have to send people an email saying, hey, we're waiting on stock, or you're just sitting on too many. But with food, you fuck that up. It's perishable. I'm sure that could be catastrophic.
Well, and everything you have to do when you take the entire supply chain like we did. I mean, we're seeing some of this weird stuff with people trying to talk about masks and COVID again.
Fuck, bro. Is that really coming back?
I don't think so. I mean, you'll get a chance to go viral again, right? I mean, you're about 3 years out from the last one. But
as I clear my throat, maybe I have COVID right now.
Yeah. Well, we've actually looked, the processing plant, we have certain chemicals we need. We have, just for cleaning.
Yeah.
Do we know we can get them? So it's, hey, how much stock do you guys pack at the harvest facility? What do you guys need? And they're like, oh, we pack about a month. I'm like, bump that to 3.
Yeah.
We
just
will,
getting out ahead of it.
We will backstop that just in case. Oh, nitrile gloves, whatever you need, all the PPE, because it's like, you got to pay attention.
Bro, it's so nuts how the data is out there to show that like when we just went everybody was frantic to have masks on everywhere they went. And now we know it didn't really do much.
Right.
You know?
And where we lived.
And now they're talking about coming back.
We lived, dude, masks weren't a thing after a month.
Good, man.
Like,
makes me happy to hear that not everybody's fucking crazy.
Yeah. It was.
Fauci was on TV a day or two ago saying, I think Americans are not going to comply this time around, and it's very concerning. It's very concerning. Dude, shut the fuck up. Just go away, man.
I think your validity card is gone, and your credibility card is real gone.
A lot of people are saying, I will not comply. I will not comply. But talk is cheap, too. So we'll see what happens, you know?
Well, and that's why we have our own supply chain now.
Of course.
Because we had to.
Yeah.
And to grow the business like we're doing and to really be able to fulfill our company mission and to help with the mission of our now business partners, you gotta execute. You gotta own it. I think there's some other words that Jocko uses, but those are the two big ones, right? Ownership and execution. And it's one of those things you have to know what's going on. And I've even talked to some of our internal people. I'm like, hey, I'm answering to some people that are exceptionally high performers. I don't know is not functional.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And we have that same relationship with our consumers. When somebody emails us and I'm like, hey guys, I was busy. That doesn't work.
Yeah. You
got to answer. You got to respond. You have to do good business. And the good news is when you do good business, like you guys do here at Electric, people come back.
Yeah.
That's how you have a business.
Is direct to consumer in your space kind of a new thing, or are there a handful of companies doing this, or you kind of fucking trailblazing with this, or what?
No, we're definitely not trailblazing.
Okay.
There was a lot of it before COVID. Not a lot of big ones. There's a lot of people kind of dabbling. COVID threw a heck of a monkey wrench into the market because by April of COVID, nobody could find beef in their grocery store.
Mm-hmm. So
the regional packing houses like the one we just took over, man, they were hammered. You couldn't get enough cattle through them. So that had this weird market swing. As everything got normal, a lot of people had overcommitted to cattle. They weren't charging the right amounts. They were just trying to, strike while the iron was hot. A lot of them went away. There's a lot of new companies coming on board right now. It's very interesting because the direct-to-consumer thing got a lot bigger after COVID because everybody wants to know they can get product.
Yeah, they don't want to rely on their local grocery store.
Well, they learned they couldn't, right?
Yeah.
I think it was in 2021. I was coming back from Carry Trainers event, and they had that was when the gas pipeline got hacked. 2 days later, JBS had their internal system ransomwared out. So there was no beef being processed for 2 days or something.
I'm not even familiar with that.
Oh yeah, it was.
So what happened?
November of 21, somebody took down the internal system of JBS, which is one of the biggest packers, and ransomed it back to them. And it's all their temperature monitoring. It's all their USDA compliance. They just ransomed it back to them.
And they paid for it?
I don't know how it all ended up, but
Dude,
you know,
who would think that would even be something that could transpire?
The funnier thing is like, man, those guys are really smart to be able to pull that off. You know, if they use that for good instead of evil, man, that'd be pretty cool for society instead of being a leech.
Fuckers.
But you know, we posted on social media through the beef company. This is the 4th supply chain disruption in 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't done something, whether it's buying beef or not, if you don't have some sort of a backstop for your family and your nutrition, and man, have a gas can in the garage. You know, Glover does a great job of talking about the preparedness side.
Yeah.
Just, you know, you can't plan for every contingency, but are you making effort?
And you plan for just a few, that puts you light years ahead of most people in society.
100%.
You know?
And so we posted on social media, this is the 4th supply chain disruption at a national level in 18 months. If you aren't making adjustments, what are you waiting for?
Yeah. And make, like, no mistake, that's not fear mongering.
No.
Like, oh, come on board with us because your supply chain is probably going to crash. It's like, no, like, just look at the environment that you're operating in, look what's happened, and you can't argue with the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think people are starting to come to terms with our supply chain is a lot more fragile than anybody ever anticipated it being.
So do you know who Temple Grandin is?
No.
She's a PhD. I believe she's also a DVM at Colorado State University. Incredible woman. They've done documentaries on her. She's very autistic, but very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote an article during COVID that said, COVID just exposed how efficient yet fragile our value chain is. Exactly what you just said. She put it in a paper. And it was like, man, you just hit the nail with the hammer on that one. That couldn't be more accurate.
And think, like, luckily we were able to make it work enough to not cause nationwide pandemonium. But if it was just a little worse, and as soon as people's kids are going hungry,
oh man,
you are going to see fucking a different side of humanity that most people can't even comprehend.
I will say, during COVID, we tripled. It went gangbusters.
So did we. Yeah. I always tell people, it's like, when you look back on COVID, it comes with a lot of anger and discontent and fucking like frustration. But a lot of people won in COVID too, especially people that were willing to push back. And we opened our gym and we grew by 600%.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, man.
Well, what was cool for us, we were instantly sold out.
Mm-hmm.
We were between pens of cattle. So, I mean,
you were between what?
Between pens.
Okay.
So we just finished harvesting a pen. We had another pen coming behind them that was almost ready, like hit it just the wrong moment from our supply chain standpoint. So we were back ordered for 8 months. Everybody got their product. I was burning emails down at 4 o'clock almost every day, 4 a.m. And then we'd bring, 5 or 6 head back, immediately box them out through FedEx, like just as fast as we could move
Fuck, so you couldn't keep up.
No. And we were telling people, and we had people, hey, I'm elderly, I'm immunocompromised, I don't want to leave my house. Those people immediately went to the top of the list, right along with healthcare workers. Hey, I'm working 17-hour shifts in Nashville. I just want some steak. Can you help me out? And I would move them to the top of the list. We had some people cancel some orders, which you should expect, right? They're
of
like,
course.
dude, I got to eat. I'm like, yeah, I get it. But man, the positivity that we saw from customers, the communal environment. I'm like, hey guys, I know I was going to send your box, but this elderly woman out of Denver emailed, I moved your box to her. Not one douchebag.
Good.
Not
man.
one. Everybody was super cool. I mean, we were on top of the communication, so that was nice because people knew what was going on.
Yeah, if you let people know and keep them informed.
Yeah. I mean, that's half the argument.
That's what makes it work,
But from the standpoint of people and the pandemonium and everything else, I didn't see that in our fellow Americans.
Yeah.
And that was awesome. I was like, they had every chance to get pissed. They had every chance to be upset. We never got a bad review on Google.
Mm-hmm. Fuck yeah.
And that was, back to your comment about hope. That was uplifting to know that all those people are in our tribe.
Yeah.
All those people understood, and they were all willing to be selfless in the face of somebody else that needed it more.
That's cool, man.
While at the same time not wanting to detonate our business because of what judgment calls we had to make. Like, so for all the negativity and all the other stuff, the positivity that I saw firsthand with our group of customers, our suppliers, was just top notch. And it was an unfortunate time and a lot of other stuff going on. But if there's a silver lining on all of that, I saw so many people step up and perform like you would want them to. It was very uplifting.
That's cool, man. I mean, even if we do experience like some really, really harsh supply chain issues, I bet what we would see is like rural communities coming together and inner cities eating themselves.
Yeah, that's
what we're going to see.
Well, the biggest issue we have in this country from a food standpoint is the supply chain. It's the trucking and logistics space. Because, and this is, to the meat conversation about Kalispell, if everybody in town, these stores know that they sell X amount of pounds a week. Oh, Christmas is coming. We're going to bump that by 10%. And for the most part, if everybody hadn't panic bought, you probably would have been okay.
Yeah.
But everybody, you can't take a town like Kalispell, which is, 10, 12,000 people, give or take. I think the whole valley is like 30 with Whitefish. Well, if the average is 2 pounds a week per person, and that average goes to 8,
yeah,
the system's
gone. Yeah.
Well, now take that times 10 or 20 or 30x in downtown Denver.
Yeah.
Or downtown Seattle. Luckily, you guys have fish. You guys have a local supply chain that can provide something. But man, if you're in Albuquerque,
yeah,
what are you going to do?
You're fucked, man.
Yeah. Or you're in Fort Bragg. I mean, hopefully the military can get you something. But when you start getting some of these big cities that don't produce anything, they are just a vacuum on the resources.
Yeah.
Well, the vacuum's fine as long as the trucks can run and there's diesel and all the other things. But that's going to be the first place people are going to see it. And Micah talked about that a lot. He was on Rogan's podcast and he talked about
When
that.
did he do Rogan's? I didn't know he did that.
Oh, I'd have to look. It was like early 22, early to mid 22.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. And that was a really good show as well. But Micah talks about that and he's like, what are you going to do? 3 days from, the switch being flipped, people are going to have problems. Or what about the water system that feeds something like that? Because say the municipal water system goes down.
Yeah.
What's that going to do?
Or the grid.
Yeah. Or both, because if you lose the power grid, the water system won't run because it's all on pumps.
Yeah. Fuck, man. You touched on it for a minute earlier, talking about like sustainable farming, because people talk about like rotational grazing and all that stuff, and you referenced it in regards to like where you're at. There's times when there's 5 feet of snow, and our rotational grazing would be very different from something that they do in Texas. Is there a lot of validity to that as far as like what we're hearing is, for people that are completely removed from the space of agriculture, is that if you don't do it right, you're going to kill the soil and farming will one day come to a screeching halt and everyone will starve to death. Is that something you can speak on?
Kind of.
Okay.
So sustainability and regenerative agriculture are buzzwords that people like to throw around. My personal argument with regenerative agriculture as a term is by saying if you're not regenerative, you're wrong. So you're saying you're either regenerative or you're degenerative. That's not right. I mean, that's a binary solution to a exceptionally complex problem. What's really throwing the sustainability curve is the social sustainability piece, because you should have economic and environmental sustainability. Are you making a profit so you can continue to operate, and are you at least keeping your soil profile or your ground profile the same? Well, now we have this third leg on the tripod that's social sustainability, which is, do people appreciate what you're doing?
Yeah.
Well, then they get to look at that through the lens of Instagram, which, let's be fair, most of the stuff on there is the peaks, not the valleys.
Yeah.
And people don't want to get in the weeds because the weeds are dangerous, because there's stuff in the weeds that some people just can't talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And I am certainly not an expert on Oklahoma agriculture. I'm not an expert on Will Harris at White Oak Pastures and what he can or cannot do. But I will just point out, how much rain do you guys get here near Seattle a year?
Fuck, I don't know when it comes to inches, but I know it's 9 months of rain.
There you go. Well, we get about 12 inches a year where I live. So the agricultural practices are going to be different.
Yeah.
Florida is the same way. But if you think about the nutritional value of the grass, where we live, grass goes dormant about right now. We'll have cattle out till October to get the cool season grasses off. We won't turn cattle out again till April. Well, that grass gets to rest. Your soil health comes back up. You get natural moisture. And then as that soil health is rocking out and then grass reemerges in April, the nutritional coefficient of that grass is really, really good because it got time to rest. That's the argument for rotational grazing, etc. Well, we can't really do rotational where we live because we live in the sand hills. So if we turn out, because the theory with rotational grazing especially is you turn out almost 3 times as many cows on a section of ground as you would need, graze it really heavy for 1 to 4 days, and then move them to another piece of ground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have hard-packed clay and you have deep-rooted soil that's not in the sand, you can do that. And if you have enough rain to sustain that growing cycle, you can do that. Where we live, you can't.
So, I mean, it really sounds like when you say sustainable farming, that's kind of a blanket term that just means you got to fucking figure it out for your environment.
Sustainable for who?
And it's dramatically different.
Well, and it's going to rain more this year than it did last year. Some of the things Rogan hammers on is like monocrop agriculture, where it's corn on corn on corn on corn. And for 20 years, that field is all corn.
Mm-hmm.
And rotational farming, putting different crops in the same field over time, because some take more nitrogen than others, and you give the soil a chance to rest. That's a very valid practice that's used nationwide, depending on the region, but also depending on the economics of the region.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know a good buddy of mine does a lot of farming. He has a cattle company, and I talked to him about this at one point, and he goes, yeah, we have one field that's been in corn for a couple of decades, but it's across the street from a massive feed yard, and they buy the silage off that because the trucking is less money.
Okay.
So the economics.
So there isn't a cookie cutter answer. Answer.
There's really not.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. If somebody in Washington's like, I do it this way and it's better because of whatever, okay, it could be better. Maybe that's ideal for where you're at. But there's a lot of people that say, well, I have to farm like this. I can't do it here. I'm like, exactly. That's why we grow crops in different regions. Washington does a lot of apples. You have a lot of wine grapes. Out near the Palouse, you guys have a ton of garbanzo beans with Heinrich's Trading and some of those other companies I've worked with in my career. Well, they don't grow those elsewhere. We don't have garbanzo beans in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
Some people will have little niche stuff, but from a production environment, that doesn't exist everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't get avocados in Washington. Those have to get brought in. We don't have salmon naturally in Colorado unless it gets on a boat or a truck to get to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's how agriculture works. The pesticides, the herbicides, there's arguments to be made over whether or not those are good or bad. And at the end of the day, I guess the easy message is the only asset agriculturalists have is the ground. You take my father-in-law that's ran that family ranch since the 70s. His real asset is the real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the insinuation of a lot of people is that you're being degenerative to the ag industry. You're not treating your ground well.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't make sense for him.
Doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
Are you raping and pillaging the ground so that your next generation can't farm it? No. Do we have to apply fertilizer? Sure, we do. But it's all about feeding people in the best way we can, based on the micro region you're in, not the state, not the county, but your spot under the sun where you are is going to be not totally unique, but definitely in its own tranche based on environmental concerns of last week. I mean, dude, I'm wearing a hoodie right now, and I'm so happy because it was 104 at the ranch last week. It's only 70 here, but I'm like, man, I need a hoodie. It's cold.
Yeah. Well, fuck, it was 90 here last week.
Yeah.
boom, fall is here, but I like it.
And that's the weird thing with ag is everybody wants to think that this is the way. Well, it's an interesting statement to make when your boots aren't in the dirt.
I was just going to say, it sounds like this is the way is probably coming from people that aren't really involved, because if you're running a farm or a ranch, all the shit that you're talking about now, I'm sure all those people have a very intimate understanding of all of this,
Well, and I will, to give the caveat to some of the people that are trying to encourage agriculture to be better. Agriculture sometimes is not as progressive as it should be because you've seen that profitability get detonated by 60 or 70% over 40 years. So the matriarchs and the patriarchs of the family that are controlling that legacy-based operation are naturally more risk averse.
Yeah.
They don't want to change things. They've seen how bad it got. So, back to something I said 40 minutes ago. If you want them to be motivated to change, support their model.
Yeah.
Support the model. Don't just stand at the rooftop and throw rocks. Spend money that benefits the model that you want to back.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just common sense, I think, but
common sense is not as common as it once was, though.
I saw a t-shirt. Common sense is a plant that doesn't grow in everyone's garden.
Yeah. Well, fuck, man. It's already 2 hours.
Sweet.
That went by quick.
Yeah.
If people want to get in contact with you or just give them your Instagram and your website and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's at Colorado Craft Beef on almost all the social platforms.
Okay.
Twitter, it's Colo Craft Beef because there was a character limit.
Okay, of course.
You can go straight to the website. If you click the info button, that'll email, it goes straight to my wife's phone.
Okay.
If you call the number on the website, the phone's sitting in my pickup. We run it.
Awesome.
So this isn't, we kind of do stuff and things and have a beef company. This is the family legacy. This is what we do. And if you have a question, I'm happy to answer it. When kind of the last thing on ag, so many people want to talk about the labels, organic, grass-fed. We talked about it too, right? If those things matter to you as a consumer, find somebody to talk to. Because if you go to Whole Foods and you buy the best labeled product in the store, understand that every one of those label claims is a lot of money. And we're not a small company now. We're not big by any means, but we're growing. Those are labels we won't pay to have.
I see.
Because it's all a loophole.
Just not interested in playing that game.
And it's all marketing nonsense because they're selling at Whole Foods and they want to check the boxes or whatever. So if you really want to know something, understand all these labels have loopholes. They have this, they have that, they have the other. If there's something that really matters to you, find a producer, not me. Find a producer and ask some questions. Get that connection. That is more valuable than any label. That's more valuable than any claim somebody wants to make. And support those people.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of people that have subscriptions with our company and they'll cancel the subscription. And, I'm always curious, hey, what's going on? Did we mess something up? I'm trying to, continually improve. And the number of people like, hey, I found somebody more local. They make good product. I'm like, hell yeah. Outstanding.
Yeah.
And I support that. And if you're an ag producer and you want to talk turkey and you want to ask some questions, reach out. We try to help as many people as we can.
Nice.
Because, I've talked to ranchers in Kansas. I've talked to ranchers in Tampa. I've talked to ranchers in California. And they're going, well, I want to go direct to consumer. I'm like, okay. And the girl in Tampa was super cool. We had a person that we knew together. And he connected me. He was like, hey, man, can you help her out? I said, yeah, no problem. Get her on the phone. And
What's your favorite product if you had to recommend one to people that are just hearing about you for the first time that wanted to go order something?
The griller box on the website.
The griller box?
Yeah, it's got same one you ordered.
Okay, yep.
It's got burger. It's got a few different steak options. If you like roasts, the variety box is really popular as well, but some people just don't know what to do with a chuck roast. So those are the two that are most common. They give you the biggest variety.
Yep.
But yeah, it's an interesting game. The partners we've now brought on board have been immeasurable in their contribution already, just because they've went through this growing pain with all of the other companies they've got. But man, we couldn't be more aligned as a group.
Yeah, that's fucking rad, man.
And thank you for having us on, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And anytime you're local, I expect at least a roll with you and some time on the mats.
Well, I mean, it wasn't as enjoyable for me as it was for you, but I'm getting better every day, right?
Well, like I told you yesterday, I'm a one-trick pony, man. I'm hunting the arm from bell to bell.
Yeah.
And then I found out after I stretched your arm that you had a bad elbow. I'm like, oh, I'm a fucking dick, dude. But I'm also not psychic, so.
No, it's just a little suspect right now.
Got it.
So I'm just, it's not hurt. I can do everything I need to do. It's just got like a twinge in it.
Oh, I see.
And it's one of those things that pops up every couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, we're going to just take it easy on that for right now. So just life, dude. Life of getting old.
Bro, life of jiu-jitsu. There's no way around it.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
And just vote with your dollar. I try to, I think I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And then, probably the call to action, Jay, we try not to make the Marine grumpy. So, one of the things that we've got going right now, if you go to the website, there will be a sign up for our newsletter.
Okay.
Which is the digital marketing type stuff that we do. Of course, you will get sales emails, but we do weekly recipes. We do a lot of other content as launch videos come out, where we're kind of talking more about the deal with Brian and Jocko and all those guys. That's going to come out through there.
Okay.
And we've got a ton of new product stuff in the hopper that's coming forward. So there's going to be a lot of things going out. I think, don't hold me to this, there's rumors of a custom hoodie drop that we're going to work on for like November, December with some Origin blanks.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude.
So
I told you they're nice hoodies, man.
Man, the plug for those hoodies was 10 below zero.
Uh-huh.
I had to go pull a truck out at the feed yard because he was an idiot and got stuck. And all I had was work gloves, a kilo hoodie, jeans, and boots.
You're good to go, huh?
If it wasn't for that kilo hoodie, and then Brian Pete's like, dude, that's not even the heavy one. I was like, well, I'm getting the heavy one because that kilo was legit.
Uh-huh.
So.
Fuck yeah. All right, man. Well, I'll put, I want you to text me any links that you want in the show notes below so people can just swipe up and connect with you with whatever email or links and websites and whatnot. But I appreciate it, man. And like you said, the whole mission is working with good people, like-minded people. So, I'm just a little fish in a big pond, but however we can help you grow the platform or just help the mission, let me know, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, dude. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.